Well, we went into the weekend on Friday, and we did not have any Kings in this country. And we start the week on a Monday, and we still don't have any Kings in this country. My goodness.
Talk about a bombshell.
It is a shocker. Good morning. Great to be here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. What's going on, John?
I saw, I guess my favorite meme about that over the weekend was the original No Kings Day was July 4th, 1776.
That's what I'm talking about, man. That's right.
That's a good one.
That's what it's all about. And that is because that's the truth. So you had all these No Kings protests over the weekend, and it was exactly what we mocked it as being on Friday. It was a rally of individuals who, frankly, need to find community in somewhere other than their politics. That's number one. Number two, there really wasn't a consistent message. There were different flags being flown. There was anti-Trump stuff. There was Mexican flags. There were Ukrainian flags. There were upside-down American flags. There was not a clear motivation or message. The common theme was, of course, Orange Man Bad. But that's it. And you had stuff like this from KCTV5 when they talked to protesters over the weekend. This is Saturday from down on the plaza.
Every single day you wake up, you read the news, and you see something you grew up in school you thought you would never, ever see in your whole entire life.
Excuse me? Wait, what?
Every single day you wake up, you read the news, and you see something you grew up in school you thought you would never, ever see in your whole entire life.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's how the last 4 years were when there was one guy in power who just let the borders be flooded by 10, 15, 20 million folks who were not here legally. That was pretty shocking to wake up to every day from about January of 21 to January of 25. I was shocked waking up to that news every single day. I was. The notion that the last 5 months, the American people have woken up to news that they have been shocked by. Well, I suppose if you went to one of these woke schools, K through 12, and you didn't get the proper history lesson, I suppose you might be shocked by some of this. But whether it's ICE, which of course has been the main culprit here in all this, as tied to No Kings Day, whether it's ICE or anything else, I mean, this is all stuff that is well within the rights of a duly elected president. And that was one thing that I thought was getting lost in the conversation over the weekend. You know, there was one lady in particular who got interviewed on a bunch of the local TV stations. Her name was Beverly Harvey. And Beverly was loving herself to cameras over the weekend. Bev, if you're out there, can we call her Bev? Bev, if you're out there, please call us on KCMO at 913-408-7957. We'd love to have a back and forth with old Bev down on the plaza. Bev said that they were single-handedly going to save democracy by having a No Kings protest over the weekend.
First thing is we're going to save democracy. We're going to do whatever it takes, whether it's calls, writing, rallies, protests. We're going to stop what is happening in Washington, D.C.
You know what word she didn't say there? Or what phrase she didn't say there? Winning elections. There's a novel concept. You know, the guy that's like doing this stuff right now won the election in November, won the popular vote, won every swing state, beat Kamala Harris by millions. That's how you stop this. That's how you, in your eyes, and I use my air quotes when I say save democracy. That's how you achieve it. And you have every right to be upset with what Donald Trump is doing. Like, you're an American. Now, I'm pretty sure that kings don't let millions of Americans protest kings. Call me crazy, but I'm pretty sure that right out of the gates was a sign of the hypocrisy and the hollowness of this entire event on Saturday in Kansas City and all over the country. But I'll leave that to the side for a second. You have every right to not like the policies of this administration. That being said, what you do to slow it down is you win at the ballot box, right? And I thought it was awfully rich that the party that 4 years ago was trying to jam a shot into people, that last year didn't have a primary when Biden dropped out, is suddenly, and made sure everybody got in line for their hand-picked candidate by the elites, now is screaming about Kings? Now is out there having the audacity to claim that their political opponents are acting as kings? Really? Boy, that is awfully rich stuff, is it not? 913-408-7957. I got a lot of messages from some of you on social media over the weekend. A couple of you went down there to the plaza. There was one at 135th and Metcalf as well in Overland Park. And listen, you can do whatever you want. I would not have given these individuals the time of day. All right. It was Father's Day weekend. I was out at the Cooper Davis Memorial 5K at Mill Valley, and we made it. I was pushing the double stroller. I think I won the double stroller division on Saturday because I was the only one with one. Garner was out there with us as well. He was rocking and rolling. Nice job out there, my man.
Thank you. I did see one other guy with a stroller, although yours was bigger.
Thank you. And I don't think anyone else was lugging around a 6-year-old in that thing. So I'll take the victory on the double stroller.
I saw that your kids crossed the finish line. How long did you actually push them?
I pushed them the whole way. I let them run the last 100 meters
really?
on the track. Yes.
That's impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate that, my man.
So doing something productive.
Yeah, exactly.
With your time over the weekend.
How dare you?
Right?
Yes, I was doing something productive with my time over the weekend. I was helping out a great cause like fighting the fentanyl crisis here in the Kansas City area with the Cooper Davis Memorial Foundation. And it was great to see hundreds of other runners out there supporting an incredible cause. Cooper's a young man who lost his life back in 2021, took a Percocet, didn't know what was in it. It was laced with fentanyl, and his parents have done an amazing job over the last few years raising awareness to the fentanyl crisis, specifically in just the Kansas City region, where the per capita rate is very high for fentanyl poisonings. So that's what I was doing. All right. Then we came up here to the station, had to tweak a couple of things up here with Mark on vacation. So we were being productive. But if you wanted to go down there, hey, I wasn't going to stop you. I just was not going to waste my time. 913-408-7957. Jim is out east. What's up, Jim?
Hey, how you doing, Pete? I was coming back from vacation down in Dauphin Island, Alabama, and we come up through a couple small towns in Tennessee, and one of them was outside of a courthouse, the federal courthouse, and all four corners of that block was covered with these protesters. And one lady in particular was holding No Kings 8647.
Yeah, I saw a few of those on the plaza too, man. I mean, obviously, it's just like James Comey. They can claim ignorance and insist that 86 means to simply get out and not to kill, which is the slang vernacular of 86. But I'm not surprised by that at all. And I don't think you should be surprised by that.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, these people are holding up all kinds of different flags. I mean, nobody was really there as organized. I mean, it was just a crowd of people just yelling with nothing, there was no cheers. I mean, it was just scream match from both sides. And it was just, but there was nobody for, anti-protesting, but it was just nuts trying to get through that mess.
Yep. It looked like an insane asylum in some parts is what it looked like.
Well, I hope they get them all back in.
Thank you, Jim. Glad you got back home safe, my man. I appreciate you. Coming up, we are going to hear from some of the great callers, 913-408-7957, who are out and about watching some of these protests and looking at these protests firsthand. We've got an update from one other part of the Kansas City Metro, and we can hear from you, 913-408-7957. Coming up next on a Monday on KCMO Talk Radio. Well, as you just heard there from Wendy on the traffic, Missouri State Highway Patrol saying at least one person died in a crash on I-35 this morning. This was just after 4:30 in the southbound lanes of I-35 and Pleasant Valley Road in the Northland, and the crash caused a brief fire on the interstate. So it is a mess. It is shut down southbound I-35, and definitely want to be aware of that as you get it going this morning. So we had several No Kings protests around Kansas City over the weekend. The big one was down on the plaza. But I saw just on the local news, a bunch of goofballs down at 135th and Metcalf, Sarco Park in Lenexa. You had in Lee's Summit as well, and that is where Carl from Independence was sleuthing around on Saturday. What did you see down there, Carl?
Well, it was better attended than I expected it to be. I counted somewhere between 300 and 400 people, most of them older. I think the slight majority was female, and they in during the just kind of sitting and quietly. Okay, I had to keep my mouth shut. It was real hard, but I just listened and watched, and I heard every slur that has been propagated against Donald Trump repeated as if it was gospel. And the one thing that really I thought was bizarre, there were several signs that were anti-Trump and billionaires, and I don't think people stopped and thought this No Kings website that pulled this together, it was international. The billionaires were behind it. So, I don't know, it was a puzzlement. These people just, I don't think ever actually caught on. I was kind of impressed at how deep the propaganda had perpetrated into this group.
So that's interesting. So you just kind of sat there and they thought you were a supporter. And so you weren't there to give anybody a hard time. You were just there to basically do a little investigative journalism for KCMO Talk Radio.
Well, I was outnumbered 400-1.
Well, yes.
That was one pick. Cars would drive by and honk and wave. And there's one pickup truck that came by twice that had a pro-Trump flag on the back of it, and everybody booed at him. But, I was just there to watch to see what was going on.
Well, good for you, Carl. You're a good American. I'm glad you shared that here on KCMO. And it's not the worst thing in the world to, hear what your political opponents are doing and what their talking points are and what their rallies look like and being on the ground for this stuff. Like, I couldn't pull it off because somebody would sniff me out, but you can, and I'm glad that you did that, Carl, and you reported back.
Well, I'm the same as you. We're always listening to the other side and trying to treat everyone with respect to their opinions.
Yeah.
No matter how ill-informed they are.
Nice job, my man. Well done. I'm glad you did that, Carl. Thanks for sharing, buddy.
Party on.
All right, there you go. That is Carl in Independence. He was down at the Lee's Summit No Kings protest over the weekend. So this one group that got a lot of attention here in Kansas City, Indivisible KC. This woman, Beverly Harvey, the clip that we played earlier in the show, she is the chapter president of Indivisible KC. She's the one who said this.
First thing is, we're going to save democracy. We're going to do whatever it takes, whether it's calls, writing, rallies, protests. We're going to stop what is happening in Washington, D.C.
So I'm like, what is Indivisible Kansas City? Never heard of the group, not familiar with it, and that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but I just wanted to do some research. So I look it up, and it's part of the actionnetwork.org groups. Now, if you go to actionnetwork.org, you'll see the AFL-CIO, America's Union. You'll see Move On. You'll see Black Lives Matter. You'll see just different organizations that they support. And some of these are very prominent national organizations, like Move On. Their headline story here at actionnetwork.org is that Move On is joining Action Network. And you can read the announcement on their site from December of 2024. So then they have all these mini organizations and mini chapters under the umbrella of the Action Network, including Indivisible KC. And it says here, Indivisible KC is a nonpartisan, issues-focused, grassroots Kansas City community, promoting civic engagement to hold our elected officials accountable. We are informed, engaged, concerned constituents making a difference. Ready to get started? Join us and sign up at this link. Then follow us on Facebook and on X.
Yeah, I was just looking for somebody that was fierce, so I'm going to move on.
I'll keep going. So that's what they bill themselves as, a nonpartisan, issues-focused Kansas City community. Well, first off, this is anything but nonpartisan. Just admit you are what you are. Like, I'm okay with you being partisan. Just admit you are what you are. You're not nonpartisan. And you're certainly not issues focused unless the issue is Orange Man bad. Like, the issue crossed a wide variety of things yesterday or Saturday. It was not simply based on the idea of we're just here for this specific issue. It was issues all over and under the sun on reasons they don't like Trump. But this is not going to work, and it did not work the way that a lot of them thought it would, like it did back in 2017. The public needle on this stuff isn't moving. There's no evidence to suggest that this was led by people who voted for the president back in November and now have completely done an about-face. The polling doesn't suggest that the people that voted for him are largely turning on him. Yes, his unpopularity is high. That's always been the case for a guy like Trump. But you think Saturday was going to be the thing that moved the needle? I don't think so. Steve is in KCK. Go ahead, Steve. You're on KCMO.
Oh, yeah, Pete. I think this was all a big dud. I went to one of it. It seems like a lot of old hippies, and there's no juice with the younger people. I think the news of the day I saw in Tony's Kansas City that the local protesters are telling Mayor Q and Musty Moo Moo to stay away. That's I think is the big breaking news development here. There seems to be a divide between the younger people telling the old useless Democratic leaders to stay away from this stuff, which I thought was extremely interesting. So you've got a civil war within from a national scale and a local scale within the Democratic Party. Now, Musty Moo Moo still showed up at this thing, but it'll be interesting to follow this and see if this continues. If they say we don't need you, Musty Moo Moo, but yeah. Mayor Q, they're telling Mayor Q to stay away.
Well, remember,
that's big. That's news.
Mayor Q was out of the country. He was in Germany over the weekend, and he didn't brag about this. I haven't seen anything on his social media about this. He was in Germany, so he was not here even if he wanted to attend. The Musty Moo Moo, Emmanuel Cleaver, was there on the plaza, and I have audio I'll play from him next hour. He was making no sense. Now, speaking of actually making sense, MSNBC, I will give him credit, made some sense over the weekend. I'll tell you how next. Did it work? Do we not have Kings anymore? I did kind of feel for the owners of the hockey team in Los Angeles and the NBA franchise in Sacramento. I did feel for them over the weekend as people were screaming about not having Kings around anymore. But I'm just wondering if this whole shtick worked over the weekend and if we no longer have Kings in this country. Good morning, 705. It is great to be here on KCMO 95.7 FM and streaming, as always, on a Monday morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app. There were three words I thought of as I watched the No Kings protest take place on the plaza, to a lesser extent in Lee's Summit and Overland Park and Lenexa, but also just around the country. And that theme was old, clueless, and white. Those were the three words that came to my mind. As I just took a look and watched as the rallies unfolded, and I said to myself, well, this is basically what we expected it to be when we were predicting on Friday what this was going to look like. Let's just put it this way. The people there needed a lot of sunscreen on Saturday, especially if you were in Kansas City, where it was sunny, hot, and humid. That's the kind of individual that was leading the rally, that was leading the way. Now, we know that most rallies and protests are going to skew a little bit older regardless of what the political issue is because, listen, you got more time on your hands. That's just reality of the situation. But I was stunned at just how overwhelmingly older and whiter these rallies appeared to be. And to me, it was a perfect indictment on what the anti-Trump movement has largely been motivated by. And that is a combination of the washed-up hippie, although washed up probably isn't the best phrase because it's not clear when they last took a bath, And then, of course, you have the younger man bun dude. The male under 40 or the female under 40.
Job, oh no.
Yes, exactly. The guy who clearly hasn't held a steady gig in quite some time, who has no problem walking into a Starbucks with a MacBook Pro, screaming about the oligarchy and billionaires as they fund Starbucks and Apple over their small businesses in their community. They have no shame, and they don't really have any clarity as to what exactly they're doing or what exactly motivates them. But don't worry, they're standing up to the billionaires, so they say. That's what it was over the weekend. And the Kansas City editorial board, well, it wasn't the editorial board, it was Melinda Henneberger. She wrote a piece about this over the weekend. She amazingly has won a Pulitzer Prize. And she writes here, quote, there were patriots from an Overland Park retirement community out on their walkers protesting. And, of course, there were a lot of retirement community folks that she could have spoken to over the weekend because that appeared to be the bulk of the protesters, those coming out of retirement homes. And she ended her piece in the Kansas City Star over the weekend by writing this. I felt so lifted up by the wisdom of these senior protesters in Overland Park. The shows of disproportionate and aggressive force on the streets of Los Angeles and of tanks on the streets of D.C. do not have that effect. And I only wish the millions wasted on Trump's birthday party had instead been spent to get back some of the 83,000 employees of Veteran Affairs he just threw out the window. I kept thinking that if only little Donald had gotten the birthday party he needed as a kid, it would have never come to this. Really, that was the assessment from the Pulitzer Prize winning columnist at the Kansas City Star.
In her own shower. What a genius.
I'm not worth your Red Lobster money.
You wonder why the Star can't get by. You wonder why they just can't get back to doing news the way it used to be. It's because this is the kind of nonsense that they're highlighting. The
No
protest
King's Day at the retirement home brought to you by Depend.
Right. That's good, John. That's good. The protests across the country said that we still want the law to be king. And those men and women on Metcalf Avenue who have lived through and given so much and still aren't finished embody the America that I choose to hold on to now. That is how the article ended by Melinda Henneberger of the Kansas City Star. Well, you can choose to hold on to whatever you want, I suppose. But apparently you're not choosing or willing to hold on to the results of the election from November 5th. And the results of the election from November 5th sent a very loud and clear message. The American people were not interested in 4 more years of Joe Biden / Kamala Harris. They were done. They checked out. They said this isn't working. Now, you're allowed to protest, obviously. I don't know how many kings allow millions of their own citizens to protest against them, but neither here nor there. I guess we don't want to let that get in the way of the broader point here with the No Kings protests. But you can choose to hold on to whatever you want. I choose to hold on to what happened on November 5th. Where a growingly diverse coalition of American citizens came together and said, you know what? Despite what the media has done to this guy over the last few years, I'm voting to put him back in the White House. Despite the fact that, yes, his first term ended in a very controversial way. And yes, he is a flawed individual. He did a pretty damn good job as the leader of this country. And I'm going to roll the dice, and we're going to go back to this guy. That is something that apparently they don't have any interest in reminding themselves of. They just don't care. And ask yourself why that might be. You had a lot of protesters out over the weekend, and they talked to local media as well. And let's play this clip from Sylvia Grass, Channel 9, KMBC, who needs to stop watching MSNBC.
Reading No Kings, a direct criticism of immigration enforcement raids from the Trump administration. and what protesters are calling an abuse of power.
I keep my tribal card with me at all times, and I live every day in the reality of knowing that I could get picked up, I could be assumed, and I could be torn away from my family without due process, without a phone call. I live in that fear.
Well, that is not the reality. When she says, I live in the reality, no, you're not living in reality. You're living in an alternative reality. When she says there to Channel 9 that I carry around my tribal card because I live in fear of getting sent where exactly? Trust me, if you had massive numbers of American citizens who just forgot their tribal card at home, getting shipped to another country or somewhere, I don't know, you're telling me that wouldn't be headline news screaming across CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, and so many other media outlets on a daily basis? Of course that would be. But when you want to create a world where you are a victim in your own mind, this is what you do. This is a prime example of it. This person has nothing to fear. But we live in a world where people want to create themselves and turn themselves into a victim. Everyone's trying to figure out how they can claim victim status. That's the name of the game in 2025. So when you find a massive group of people, as what we saw on Saturday, who will allow you to declare themselves as victims to the world and oppressed, whether it's true or not, well, guess what? This is what you get. And then people who actually have the audacity to put themselves on camera without realizing how ridiculous they look and sound. You know what? When you're caught so deep into that bubble, you can't see the forest through the trees. You are incapable of understanding what is actually going on around you. We all need that person who's going to burst our own bubble, right? It's important to have that person in your life, in your career, in your day-to-day, personally. You need that person who's going to call out your BS and call out your nonsense. And we all can probably do a better job of having that person in our lives. I know I can. I know that's true for many of us. But some of these folks, they don't even acknowledge that that bubble needs to potentially be bursted. Like, they are not even willing to have the conversation because they are so caught in the weeds of the nonsense. And that clip from KMBC here in Kansas City on the Plaza is perfect case in point. It's 7:15. Glad you're back with us on a Monday morning on KCMO Talk Radio 95.7 FM. We're streaming, as always, on the KCMO Talk Radio app. Coming up, we have Country Stampede 3-day passes that we are giving away at 7:45 and 10:45 all week long here on KCMO. That is at Azura Amphitheater coming up next weekend. We will kick off that giveaway in 30 minutes on 95.7 FM. Coming up, one of our favorite local politicians to goof on found themselves down at the rally over the weekend. And that went about exactly as well as you would have expected. We'll play the audio coming up next. The Musty Moo Moo Man himself was down there on the Plaza over the weekend. I wasn't sure he was going to make it, but Emmanuel Cleaver was down on the Plaza where the No Kings protests were happening against President Trump on Saturday afternoon. And if this is not a sign that it is time for Emmanuel Cleaver, Missouri congressman here in Kansas City, to hang him up, I don't know what is. This was, even Joe Biden was blushing when he heard Emmanuel Cleaver try to spit it out over the weekend on local news.
The framers of our country put together some pretty far-reaching documents by which future generations would have to live. The president himself said, I don't know whether I will follow the Supreme Court. I think that's one of the most dangerous statements I've ever heard in my life.
Well,
you mustard moo.
Just spit it out already. Please, spit it out, for crying out loud. Congressman Cleaver, my goodness. Every time he shows up in front of a microphone and a camera, he's making less sense. It's like, put it together, buddy. Come on, what are we doing here?
That's not going to win you a prize on Jeopardy.
No.
Sorry, that's an incorrect answer.
No, sir. No, sir. I'm listening to this, and I'm like, man, he's trying so hard. but it's just not connecting for Cleaver.
The framers of our country put together some pretty far-reaching documents.
At least the horn honk there may have thrown him off his game of hair.
Typically, the Constitution is framed. That's the reference. So the framers of the
honk honk. Which one of our listeners was that, by the way, honking at Cleaver in the background? Come on, somebody raise their hand and call and admit that was you as Cleaver is getting interviewed on KCTV5. That was one of you driving by and honking your horn at Cleaver. And, of course, local media will portray it as lots of support for Cleaver. People were honking their horn left and right as they were driving by him. Why
Probably was wandering out into the crosswalk.
Oh, man. So he's trying to spit it out about the Constitution, and then he says this.
By which future generations would have to live. The president himself said, I don't know whether I will follow the Supreme Court. I think that's one of the most dangerous statements I've ever heard in my life.
Now, I remember a time when Joe Biden basically told the Supreme Court to pound sand when it came to his student loan bailouts. In fact, I'm reading this from the Biden White House archives. Their official statement here. This would have been from June 30th of 2023, almost 2 years ago to the day. Today, the Supreme Court sided with Republicans in Congress. I believe the court's decision to strike down my student debt relief program was a mistake, and it was wrong. So,
acting with impunity.
Yeah, wait, hold on. Are we allowed to have the president criticize the Supreme Court or not? Is that something that is allowed or not allowed? Or is it just based on whether or not your preferred politician finds themselves in the White House? Is that really the game that is being played here? Emmanuel Cleaver seems outraged by all of this. But is it really just an act? You know and I know it probably is. But it's just like this protester who Channel 5 also talked to. They opened up their package with this guy. And he wasn't like Man Bun Bro from the streets of New York last week, but he certainly looked like someone who hadn't showered in a very long time and also hadn't got a haircut in months. So instead of finally going and getting that haircut on Saturday, he elected to find himself down on the plaza where he said this.
Every single day you wake up, you read the news, and you see something you grew up in school you thought you would never, ever see in your whole entire life.
Well, there's no way this guy's waking up reading the news. I mean, it's just there's not a chance. Okay, he's not doing that, I promise you. He may be waking up and scrolling through TikTok. He may be waking up and stumbling upon The View, where your testosterone levels have to be below a certain number to watch The View. He may be doing that, but there's no way he's actually getting the news and digesting the real news of the day and then coming to the conclusion that where he was needed on Saturday was not at the barbershop, but instead was at the No Kings rally on the plaza. It was a who's who of incoherence on Saturday is what it was. There was not a clear message based on the signage. There was not a clear message based on the flags. I mean, the flags, you had upside-down American flags, you had the Mexican flag, you had the Ukraine flag. It was every flag, you could find was waving. That's why John couldn't make it, by the way. He couldn't get his tube socks, Chuck Taylors, and Mexican flag.
I didn't have it all.
It couldn't get it all in time.
Yeah, not in time.
It happens. But that is par for the course. Well, we are learning more by the hour about the individual who is suspected now and has been caught after the manhunt was on for the better part of 2 days for Vance Belter. This is the individual who is the suspected political assassin, captured late last night after an intense manhunt for the gunman accused of murdering a Minnesota state lawmaker and wounding another. So Belter's a 57-year-old. He's a former appointee of Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. He was sought by police for allegedly wounding State Senator John Hoffman and his wife and killing former Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband. So after a 2-day manhunt, law enforcement apprehended Belter last night. He was taken into custody without incident in a rural wooded area southwest of Minneapolis after authorities received a tip about a possible sighting hours earlier. So immediately what's happening here, and I saw this on social media, and I'm sure that you did as well as you are following the news. You saw people wanting to jump to conclusions in terms of what exactly this guy's politics were. You have those on the left who are saying, well, this is a man who was a preacher. This is someone who was against abortion. So he targeted these Democratic lawmakers because of their politics. You have those on the other side who are saying this guy had no Kings flyers in his vehicles, and he was actually someone who was targeting Democrats because he was to the left of these more moderate Democrats who were the ones who were shot. I don't know, and we don't know, what exactly motivated this guy. We don't have any idea yet. We know that his story at this point doesn't add up. That's what we know. His story is very bizarre. His career doesn't really make sense. What he was doing personally was not making a lot of sense leading up to these tragedies over the weekend. He'd been living with his wife in a rural area outside of the Twin Cities, but then he was staying a few nights a week at a rental home in a working-class Minneapolis neighborhood with a couple of roommates. He was working overnight shifts for an organization that handles eye donations, according to one of his roommates, and was trying to get a security company off the ground. There's this roommate who has been going viral for things that he claims Belter was texting him about in recent days. And the roommate, David Carlson, is this guy who looks out of central casting for a fat, overweight, old pizza delivery driver guy, and he's wearing a Papa John's polo. The whole thing is just bizarre to me. It's very weird. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We've gotten to this world where we say, well, the political violence, where's it coming from? Who cares where it's coming from? Right. My goodness, there's a lot of missing information right now on this guy Belter. And there are conflicting details. But no matter what, just reject him. Political violence is despicable. It doesn't matter. I'm sitting here and I'm seeing people pointing the finger over the weekend saying, he's from your side. He's from your side. And I'm like, guys, just stop. You all sound like a bunch of idiots. All right, It doesn't matter what side this person is on. What matters is that it's condemned. And if he happens to be someone who is against abortion, which just happens to line up with my worldview, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean he's one of me. Doesn't mean he's one of you. Doesn't mean he's one of us. Doesn't mean any of that. It means he was a mentally deranged person. There you go. Who may have committed some heinous acts of violence, who I don't view as being in line with me, who I don't view as someone as a sympathetic figure. And we've lost complete sight of all that, John.
Well, absolutely. And to your point, it's a mental issue. Well, what do you have, PTSD? It doesn't matter.
I don't care what he had.
Right. It doesn't matter his politics, his religion, his motivation relative to his mental sanity.
Yeah.
We know.
We know.
Everything we need to know is evident.
He's a complete lunatic, and now he is an alleged violent criminal. That's it. That's the end of the story, okay? Now, I will say we've obviously had a lot of violence come from those who are very hardened on the left side of the political aisle. We have seen that, right? Whether it's targeting healthcare CEOs, whether it's targeting Jewish people like Sarah Milgram here in Johnson County, Kansas, who was walking out of an event with her boyfriend here a couple of weeks ago and got killed for no reason other than being Jewish. We have seen that. And there are too many times that people have kind of excused it. That they said, well, we got to listen to what they're saying. That happened with the United Healthcare guy, Luigi Mangione. You had Chris Murphy. And I found the quote this morning from Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut, who put out a statement at the time and was like, I think that we need to listen to people like Luigi Mangione. No, we don't. No, we don't. We do not need to listen to Luigi Mangione. We don't need to listen to people like Vance Belter, who was arrested for this alleged heinous act over the weekend in Minnesota. We don't need to listen to any of these people. Now, I have a lot of questions about this guy's background, and I have a lot of questions about this guy's story. because not a lot of it right now is adding up. But I will sit here and say it doesn't, in the end, really matter to me what this guy's story or background is. Does it look weird? Sure, it does. It looks weird. It's bizarre. It also is frightening when you think about what he did. Showing up to these lawmakers' homes dressed as a cop with a mask over his face. I mean, that is as creepy and weird as it gets, right? Think about that. It's nighttime. Maybe you look outside of your little peephole there. Maybe you look outside of your Ring doorbell and you see a cop uniform. Now, I'd like to think I would have seen the really bad mask that he was wearing over his face. I'd like to think I would have noticed that. But maybe right away you just see a guy dressed as a cop. It's late at night. You're not thinking much of it, and you open up the door. I don't want to judge those who were shot either in this instance. But that is an incredibly scary way for somebody to be attacked, knowing full well, right, that if you immediately think that you've got a cop at your front door, what are you doing? You're opening it. Mike's in Olathe, 913-408-7957. Go ahead, Mike. You're on KCMO. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, man. Great points. And, we have become such a labeling society that I don't like that. I never liked the term hate crime, because as I was telling John, I said, most of the time, the people they hate the most are themselves. They're confused. They're upset. They've got some kind of thing going on. This guy was just wigging out, had issues, and you're right. We don't know. But I saw that mask. I thought of Mike Myers. I thought, my good God, I was like, where's whatever her name is in the Halloween movies. It was a freaky look. But you're right. He's a cop. But the label thing, dude. Hey, we've become labelers. We've become factions. It's what the problem is. We look at what someone says they are, and then we judge them. And in this case, but the labeling thing, I think a lot of people, these people are all protesting all weekend, and part of the reason is they hate what's going on because they've never seen a country run normally, and it's trying to get fixed, and they are confused. So there's all this, they hate everything. And you see hate everywhere, so to judge one crime upon hate is ridiculous. But I think a lot of these folks that commit these crimes, I think they hate themselves and their situation almost as bad as they hate anything else, and they lash out.
Yeah, they're mentally ill, Mike. I mean, you know it and I know it. They hate themselves because they are clearly mentally ill and mentally unwell. Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, addressed this late last night in a press conference at about 11 o'clock, and he said this.
Moment in this country where we watch violence erupt. This cannot be the norm. It cannot be the way that we deal with our political differences. Now's the time for us to recommit to the core values of this country. And each and every one of us can do it. Talk to a neighbor rather than arguing. Debate an issue. Shake hands. Find common ground.
You first, Tim. I'm not going to sit here and get preached to by Tim Walz.
Right.
I'm just not going to do it. Tim Walz could lead the way on this today if he wanted to. Instead, he was the same guy who a couple of months ago was bragging during a speaking gig about how Tesla stock is going down and he couldn't be happier. It is awfully rich for Tim Walz, of all people, who, of course, was Kamala Harris's running mate last year, to be the guy saying, this cannot be the norm. He has had many opportunities in the last few months when political violence has happened in this country to say this very thing and to lead the way, lead with his own actions. And, this overzealous Rockette wannabe huckster could never do it. Now, I would love to see this happen from both sides of the political aisle to some degree. Sure, that would be great. Is Trump probably the best suited to be that guy? Okay, you can make the argument that's not the case, and I'd probably buy it from you. But he's also not the major problem right now. You had people with signs on the plaza over the weekend saying 86-47. You can interpret that 86 on a slang way. You can interpret it in a literal way. Either way, based on what James Comey did a couple of weeks ago and the way that was interpreted, it would be very irresponsible for you to show up to a protest on the plaza this weekend with an 8647 sign, but people did it. I saw them on local TV. So I'd like for Tim Walz to start by looking in the mirror. And if he truly wants to see this kind of stuff not be the norm, he can wake up today and he can lead the charge. I agree. We don't want it to be the norm. But everybody involved has to be willing to look in the mirror first and look at their own side and see that for what it is. And unfortunately, I don't think that that's happening right now. So we'll wait and see how exactly this Vance Belter story plays out in Minnesota. I mean, right now it's an absolute tragedy. It looks like they've got the right guy here. But there is so much more that we have to learn about him and his background, and that has not come out yet. 913-4087-957 is how you join us on KCMO. It's 8:15 on a Monday. Glad you're here on 95.7 FM. Do you see what 10 years ago today was? Saw this on social media early this morning. Today was 10 years since Donald Trump came down the golden escalator at Trump Tower and announced that he would be running for president of the United States. So that's got to be the most famous escalator in the world. Is there a second most famous escalator or no? I don't think there is. But I was thinking about it during the last couple of minutes. I'm like, is there even a second most famous escalator? Is there one at Oak Park Mall maybe that really stands out above the rest? I don't think there is, though. So with that, it was a day that, of course, I remember it, and I remember where I was when Trump announced he was going to run for president, and a lot of people scoffed at it. A lot of people sat there and said, you know what, this guy's not serious. He's not a politician. He's not one of us. He's saying incendiary things. He's just trying to be outrageous. Well, we talked about this with Guy Benson last week at our live show here in Kansas City, which was outstanding, and I was still thinking about it all weekend and the great time we had with a couple hundred awesome listeners and the show that Guy put on, the stories that he shared. And Guy, listen, he doesn't hide from the fact that when Trump was one of 16 candidates back in 2016, as he said on Thursday night, he liked the other 15. He was a fan of everybody to some extent, more than Donald Trump. Now, there are plenty of people who, of course, got major TDS on the Republican side, left the party, or some who didn't vote for him, but then did vote for him in 20 and 24. I had voted for the guy 3 times. He was not my primary pick. I was a Ted Cruz guy back in 2015, 2016. For like 2 weeks, I was a Scott Walker guy. Remember him, the old governor of Wisconsin? My buddy was working for Scott Walker. He asked for a donation. I gave him $50, and I said, I guess I'll pull for Scott Walker. He was a red governor in a blue state. I said, maybe he's on to something. And Scott Walker had one of the worst first debates I've ever seen in American history, and that was the end of my Scott Walker fandom, John.
I was going to say, you sound like marking the parlays there when you get involved that early in that minute.
Well, it was a lifelong friend. He said, hey, I'm working for Scott Walker.
Yeah.
And it would have looked good for him. He didn't care how much I donated.
Fair enough.
He just said, hey, I need to get a lot of numbers of donations. I said, here's $50.
Help you out.
I said, fine. I guess I got to root for the guy now.
A little something for the effort.
Yeah, exactly.
You're on the bus for as long as it's running, right?
Yeah. I wasn't married to him. But I threw him $50 and I said, sure, I'll root for the guy. And then he had an awful debate performance, and I'm like, I'm embarrassed. That was the biggest waste of $50 I've had in a long time. So then I came around to Ted. Ted was my guy. And, of course, Trump becomes the nominee. And I quickly was like, all right, I'm on board with this. I'll roll with Trump. The people picked him. Let's rock and roll, baby. But here we are now 10 years later, and I can't help but think, no matter how you feel about 2020, Trump's legacy is so much more well-defined having these 2 non-consecutive terms than had he had 8 years in a row. It's kind of like, not that I've ever experienced this personally, but I know many of you have. You're dating somebody, you think the relationship's going pretty well. Maybe you even love that person. But something happens and you think there's something better out there. And you dump them. And then after a period of time, you're like, man, what a mistake that was. I had it pretty good. May happen with a job too, right? You leave a job, the grass is always greener until it's not. Until you're like, suddenly, wow, that last gig was actually a pretty good one, wasn't it? Boy, maybe I should have appreciated that a little bit more. We've all been there in some way in our lives. And had Trump gone 8 straight years as president, there would have been such fatigue that it would have taken a long time, I think, for a lot of people. Outside of the diehard Trump voter, a lot of people would have taken a long time to realize, hey, this guy was actually pretty good at the job. But then he loses 2020. You get 4 years of Joe Biden and the disaster that was. Come on, man. And suddenly, I think there's a newfound appreciation for what Trump has done as president on the job and how he goes about doing the job. And that's an important part of who he is as well.
Slightly different take on that. 2 years of Trump in a row, or 2 terms, we could have been well on our way to prosperity and then been oblivious to the ludicrousness of the left. So it does work out in your manner. But I'm like, there's nothing to say that 2 terms of Trump wouldn't have been, it would have been pie in the sky.
Well, that's true. But there was such... See, I think that I totally get what you're saying there, John. And I do see your point. But I think that 4 years of Joe Biden, and I use this term tongue-in-cheek, radicalized a lot of people to see just how bad some of the left's policies are.
No, I agree with you there. If he'd have had 2 in a row, we wouldn't have seen that, and we deal with it at some point in the future.
Yes.
Better to deal with it now, and this has worked out in the best possible scenario.
Yes, exactly. Because at some point, you still would have had people who would have said, we just haven't tried open border socialism,
right.
Massive spending. We haven't tried it the right way. Yes, we've got to do it the right way. Just give Bernie and the boys a shot and the gals a shot and the they-thems a shot. Yeah. And it's going to go outstanding.
Well, we've had 8 years of this prosperity.
Yeah, enough. It's time for the little guy to win again. That's what they would have done.
Sure.
And there's no doubt in my mind that right now, had Trump won in 2020, you would have a Democratic president. There's no doubt in my mind that would be the case today. So are you better off getting it out of the system, trying the massive government spending, spiking inflation, running open borders, and seeing what a mess it was over the last 4 years, and then reverting to the current setup we have right now? Or would you be better off trying that experiment now, which is what I believe we would be going through today in this country had Trump won 2 consecutive terms? Maybe it's inconsequential, but for Trump's legacy in particular, and that's what I'm talking about here right now, for his legacy in particular, his legacy is helped by having Joe Biden sandwiched right in between them.
Well, and the sum total of the story will be great. I mean, we tried to kick the king off the ballot, right? The desperation of the left knows no bounds, and that's what we found out. He can't run. Kick him off the ballot in Colorado and kick him off the ballot here, right?
Yep.
Speaking of democracy under threat.
That's right. On the text line, 913-408-7957. Oh, no. A texter admitting to sending Scott Walker $100. Man, you got fleeced for double what I did. Oh, no.
Uh-oh.
No. I'm sorry to hear that on the text line. I thought my $50 went down the drain. Your hundo went down the drain. So over the weekend, there was this, of course, U.S. Army 250th birthday celebration that took place. And it was overall well done. I admit I didn't watch a ton of it on Saturday. I watched a lot of the golf, and I checked it out a little bit on Saturday night. But it looked like it went well. And even MSNBC admitting over the weekend that this went better than they expected.
One thing I will say, I want to go back to you, Allie, that again, when we talk about this sort of tension in the country, and sometimes, you and I have both been at Trump rallies, those can be, very tense, a kind of, I would say, like kind of a dark, malevolent energy sometimes in them. Not always, but it doesn't seem like that's the energy on the mall today, which I think is a good sign, right?
Correct. That you're really correct about that, Chris, and it's something we were watching for. Yeah. I'm just sort of surprised by the number of people who were at the front of the parade, watching, cheering, and then would come and ask to take a selfie.
Yeah, right.
This is a very different mood here.
Yeah.
People seem to be going out of their way to say that they're here to celebrate.
Hold on, stop right there. Did that reporter say, I was shocked at how many people were celebrating and then asked me for a selfie? Is he assuming that MSNBC viewers would never be caught dead at a parade on behalf of the U.S. Army? Like, what is he saying about his own viewers when the MSNBC reporter is admitting that he was shocked that people at the parade celebrating the U.S. Army are asking him for pictures? What a self-own that is. Yeah, our viewers generally hate the Army. They hate the country. They hate, what's this all about? You mean these people want to take selfies with us? It's like, dude, you're not making the point you think you're making here, brother. You're just not doing it. Let's continue.
The Army's 250th birthday. Now, there are people walking around with signs. A moment ago, while you were talking to Jen, guy just came around and said, Trump 2028. And I said, how does that work exactly? And he's like laughing and had a big flag on him. So there's some politicization here, but it is not, it's not dark. It's not tense. It's not amped up. It's different. It's different from covering a Trump rally.
It really never is that dark. I mean, the guy's dancing a Macho Man on the stage half the time. I know you guys want to make everything really dark with Trump, but it really is never as dark as you make it out to be. And certainly it wasn't on Saturday. Darkness was not a defining quality of that parade. It wasn't. And MSNBC seemed very much caught off guard by that. And even the people who were giving him a hard time, Trump 2028, the guy was laughing it off, okay? He was just trying to get under his skin. And apparently it may have worked to some degree.